Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Dunn Wisdom Morning Show. I am your host, Melissa P. Dunn, CEO of MD Marketing Network and founder of this Dunn Wisdom movement. So y'all notice it's a little bit different. I'm coming to you live from my car today. It's such a pleasure being an entrepreneur and a public servant because I'm learning to be fluid and flexible. So y'all are going to flow with me today as I do the show from my car in gratitude. So, in the Dunn Wisdom Morning Show, we love to introduce you to women who are getting it done in life and in business, women whom I admire. And my next guest is one of these women that has had such a tremendous impact on me in my political career. She is a woman who really has a heart and a mind to serve the people of Florida. And so I want to introduce you to one of my mentors and my friend, State Rep Christine Hunschofsky. State Rep, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. We finally were able to make this work out with our busy schedules.
I know. And even though I've known you for like over a year, going on 2 years now, I still butcher your last name. Could you please say your name properly for my audience?
Hunschofsky.
Hunschofsky. Ooh, listen. So how
perfect. That was perfect.
So how are you, State Rep?
I am excellent. I'm doing very well. Thanks for asking. How are you doing?
I am well. I am, one of these things where you are moving all the different parts. And so today I'm learning to be fluid and flexible.
Yep. That's what we have to do.
That's what we have
life
to do.
as it comes and adjust accordingly.
That's it. So, State Rep, would you share with us a little bit about yourself? And just give us just a brief overview of kind of who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Christine. I was born and raised actually in Boston, Massachusetts. Got my degrees there. I have undergrad in business and philosophy. I have my master's in business administration. And my husband, my family and I, we moved here to Florida about 23 years ago for my husband's job. Our oldest was 2 at the time, and I was pregnant with our youngest, and I had no family or friends here in Florida. And so getting involved started with just wanting to make Florida our home and building a community for our family. So I got very involved in local groups, whether it was with the church, with different moms, then it was on my homeowners association. That was at the kids' school. It was on the sports fields. And I was going to commission meetings. And eventually a seat opened up. I had actually served on the city's education advisory board for 7 years. A seat on the commission opened up. And since I've been attending the meetings for about 10 years, people said, oh, you should really run for it. And so I did. And I started as a Parkland City Commissioner. And then the mayor's seat opened up about 3.5 years later, and I ran for mayor. And I was in my 4 years as mayor. We had flooding where people couldn't leave their developments. We had Hurricane Irma. We had the mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and we had COVID. So they were 4 intense years filled with crisis, trauma, you name it. And then my friend Kristen Jacobs was our state representative for this district. And she had always said to me, Christine, someday when I'm done, I think you would be great because you know how to work with people. You're a hard worker. And unfortunately, she had cancer. And a few weeks before she died, she asked me to run for the seat. So I ran for state representative. And I have now been a state representative for 3 years, and it's been a very different journey than local government, but really fulfilling in the sense that if you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to listen and learn from others, you have an opportunity to make a difference in so many people's lives. And that's kind of where I am today.
Such a powerful journey. And the thing that I learned from what you just said at the heart and the root of it is service, because you started serving way before you even decided to run. What inspired you to get involved?
I want to feel part of a community. And I don't know that I realized it when I was doing it, but when I look back, I mean, I wanted my family to feel like we belonged in the place we lived. We wanted to be part of the place we lived. And I know as a local elected official, we had people who were so engaged on the local level, and that's what builds that sense of community. And that's what makes communities stronger, so that when they're facing, crises like flooding, when they're facing a hurricane, people can come together and help each other. Even in the aftermath of the school shooting, even when we had COVID, when we were dealing with COVID, people were always stepping up in this community to help each other. And that's why that sense of service comes from wanting to be part, of a community. We as human beings all want to feel like we matter. We all want to feel like we belong somewhere. And it's important not only to be part of that, but also to create a space for that in any community we're in, whether it's a work environment, where we live. It's so important to have that.
And in order for us to really do our jobs well as elected officials, we need those residents who are committed to showing up and serving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's important for us as public servants. I talk about this all the time, and it's ironic that I talk about it, but it's listening.
Yes.
Listening, and the way to hear from people is to show up where they are. And that is also part of service, whether you're helping doing volunteering at a local charitable organization, somewhere in the community, at the schools, wherever. Showing up where people are is so important, because it, first of all, validates them in the sense that you see them, but it's
Yeah.
also where they're going to feel comfortable talking to you. I can send out all the emails I want. Please, let me know your thoughts. But it's very different when you're right in front of someone. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the beautiful part of public service, is really having those interactions and having people trust you to tell their stories and carry those stories with you when you're dealing with policy that affects them.
Absolutely. Trust is really the key. And it sounds like I'm hearing you say that one key way to build trust is to not only show up where people are and meet them exactly where they are, but to be present enough to truly hear and see them.
Correct. And for that, there you need to have mindfulness. So I always say it's so important to every morning kind of do a reset, be really centered in your purpose. Like, why are you here? What is your job? And that way, when you're showing up in places, no matter what kind of chaos is going on around you, or what's trying to kind of rip you away from, who you are and what your job is, you can show up in a more purposeful way. And those interactions, those discussions, not only have more meaning, they also stay with you in the long term. So when we were discussing some policy up in Tallahassee, I'll remember when somebody told me about issues they had accessing, for example, mental health services. So I can say, well, that's great that that's how you say it should be. But let me give you a couple of examples from people who I know and I've spoken to about the experience they've had that's very different from what the experience is supposed to be. And you can only do that in an authentic way if you show up centered and with purpose.
Yes. And did that approach, that mindfulness practice and that connection that you have to your purpose, was that helpful to you as you were guiding the city of Parkland through 4 back-to-back tragedies and traumas?
100%. Every time we had something coming our way, and we had several things coming our way, I always asked myself, like, what is my role here? And there are a lot of people who had different roles. And for me, it was always about what is my role. And for example, with Hurricane Irma, we were at one point supposed to be a direct hit for a Cat 5 hurricane. And I knew and could see the anxiety people had in the community. So a lot of it was empowering them with information about, resources available, checklists. I posted what our checklist was at home and some of the things we were doing to make sure we were prepared for the hurricane. I drove through neighborhoods. There were people outside just wanting to check in on them, letting them know we're here and we're going to get through this together. And other people had different roles. The emergency managers, had certain phone calls they had to make sure. So I think it's just really important to realize that we each have a part to play in showing up for each other, strengthening our communities, and serving. And just making sure we understand what our role is and what the roles of others are, and that we're working together toward the same goal.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I admire you so much. You and I have had plenty of conversations when I'm tackling something that I'm trying to get done. And I would call you, and you always had this way of kind of helping me to get grounded and getting back to exactly what it is that I was looking to do for the people of my community. And that's one of the things that I really admire about you, State Rep, is your ability to just connect with the humanity of any issue. And not a lot of people know how to do that.
Yeah, it's not easy. I appreciate you saying that about me, and it's an honor to be your friend and be here for you. You've been here for me as well. It's hard because when you connect with that humanity, you're also showing your own vulnerabilities.
Yes.
And when you're doing that, it's an act of courage in many ways. But how can people trust you with their stories when you're not willing to come with an open heart, an open mind, and also your humanity? And I feel like in this world where we are surrounded with our phones and our computers, and we get kind of disconnected in real life, shall we say, that it's so much more important to lean into that common humanity. And that's also where we have those values discussions, and we can build policy based on, those shared values. I talk to people about different things, and if you start with the policy conversation, it's automatically people take their sides on a policy. But when you talk about values,
Yes.
most people want the same things. So the question is, where are our shared values, and how can we kind of talk about those and figure out how we can get shared policy to support those values?
That's so powerful. And I'm thinking about the women that are in the audience now who may be in the workforce and they're trying to move their career forward, or those who may be stay-at-home moms that are really engaging in the community, that's trying to move a piece forward. How can they apply that philosophy that you just talked about to their situation?
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of quiet in the morning, even if it's just 2 or 3 minutes, deep breathing, kind of reconnecting with who you are and what your goals are and what your purpose is. And when situations come up, and we all have busy schedules, we all have surprises that happen in our daily lives, and being able to try and remain centered stops us from going down. You know what I mean? Being down on ourselves. And it also stops us from getting caught up in the winds that may take us off course.
Yes.
And so part of it is acknowledging those moments, being able to identify when that's happening, and then taking a moment. Again, big fan of deep breathing, and just saying, okay, let's remember why we're here. Let's remember what the goal is. And also let's remember whatever it is, we got this, we can figure it out.
Mm,
And everything we do is a journey, and it
yeah,
may not go the direction we think it's going to go, but no matter what direction it goes, we need to realize that we have the ability to handle it, no matter what comes
that's
our
it.
way. And
That's it.
when you deep down know that, then every day is on some level an excellent day.
Every day is an and that belief and the mindfulness practice for me is what really anchors me,
Yeah,
right? I was
same,
what
same.
I was watching a video on YouTube from Plum Village, which is, Thich Nhat Hanh, who was the Zen master. One of the women that followed, that one of the nuns in his monastery was talking about how, if you think about a hurricane, and unfortunately in Florida, that's our reality, right? But
Yes.
with a hurricane, as the wind blows, a cyclone blows, it may have different debris on the outer shell, but on the inner shell, where the eye of the storm is, that's perfectly peaceful,
Yeah.
right? And that's perfectly calm. And so part of what mindful practice does for me, and part of what mindful leadership does for me, is keep me in the eye, keep me
Right.
calm, keep me centered. And no matter what's happening on the outside, I can just go to that place and know that I'm enough and I got
Yes.
this.
And that's powerful because
Mm-hmm.
then we're showing up with our best skills, right?
Yes.
Because fear isn't taking over, anxiety isn't taking over, self-doubt isn't taking over. And listen, I want to be very clear. There is no moment, there is no day when I am always at my best at every moment. But we have to keep talking about it as a
Yeah.
reminder so that we can get better at identifying those moments that try and take us out of that center,
Mm-hmm.
and having techniques like mindfulness, like the deep breathing, to bring us back to that so that we can show up with our best skills and our best talents, and with that sense of purpose.
And I think sometimes, or at least as a young woman growing up, I saw the way some people or women led with the sense of competitiveness, with the sense of, grind, grind, grind. And I'm learning from myself and from watching leaders like you that it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be competitive, right? It doesn't have to be either or. It sometimes gets to be both
Yeah.
and we get to be nice and kind and compassionate while still being strong, while still being badass,
Right.
still getting things done. And you know what? We're not perfect, but we're progressing.
Right. And I like to look at it as, and I work on this every day. I don't want the behavior of others to change who I am and how I
Oh,
show up.
that part. That's been my number one lesson and my number one opportunity since I've been in this role as a public servant in this
Same. I'm
way.
still working on it. Same. But it's powerful. It's powerful.
Yeah.
And knowing, when you talk about competition, I mean, we're elected officials, we've had races, but knowing whatever the outcome is,
Mm-hmm.
showed up as did the work, and whatever the outcome is and the path is, that's the path we're supposed to be on, I believe. And it doesn't mean, you're not working. Of course you work, you do your best, but you're showing up as the person you are so that no matter what happens,
Mm.
you showed up as yourself, authentically, compassionately, with an open heart and open mind. And then whatever comes beyond that, that's where you're supposed to be. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, and it's all
Life is
perfect.
short. I've seen so many people dealing with so many things.
Mm.
we have a responsibility to ourselves, to our loved ones, to our friends, to our communities, to show up authentically and get one life.
That's it. And we get to live it to the best of our authentic ability.
Exactly.
So what's happening in Tallahassee? What's on your agenda for this upcoming session?
Yeah, so we just finished. We had to get all our bills into drafting, so I'm still deciding. We in the House were limited to 7 bills. So I'm still deciding what those 7 will look like. I do have a social worker compact, which would allow reciprocity for social workers. I am working on some data privacy. I'm also working on mental health with the schools. Also working on some school safety. Our appropriations are in, so everybody had to already file their appropriations. Those had to be in. So I'll start working on behalf of the cities and the community I represent to see where we can help them with funding.
Mm-hmm.
As far as some of the larger issues, I do know healthcare workforce will be one of the larger issues. I know there is an education deregulation package there as well. I haven't had an opportunity to look at everything incredibly closely, but yeah, so we will be busy. We have 2 more committee weeks in December, and then our 60-day session starts in January and ends at the beginning of March. So
Wow, busy schedule.
It's
And
a busy
so
schedule. I feel like, opening day is like the beginning of a sprint, and it's only 60 days, and I want to do as much good as I can in that time. I love the process from the perspective of listening to people from different parts of the state, listening to different issues. We deal with everything from healthcare. Obviously, property insurance is a big issue. And it's really wonderful to learn a lot. But it's also so important to build those trusting relationships so that where there is common ground and there are those shared values, we can work together. And we do actually, the places we don't work together very well, those make the headlines. And as they should, the public should be aware. But the public should also be aware that 85+% of the bills we pass are unanimous and bipartisan. So I think it's important to know that.
So how do you establish trust and find common ground with folks who have an ideologically opposing view to your own? What's the key to do that? Because I know that you've done that very successfully. I mean, in the last session, you were able to get a lot of things done. What's the key to that kind of strategy?
I think it starts with coming with an open mind and heart. And what do I mean by that? I'm not assigning intention to what anybody does. I don't know what people's motives are, and I'm not going to act like I do. So I take at face value everyone from the beginning. And then we talk about how we grew up. I think what people seem to forget is how we look at the world depends a lot on our lived experiences.
Yes, that worldview is so important.
We have not all had the same lived experiences. And so it's important to learn, where did you grow up? How did you grow up? What were some of the experiences you had? And then when you talk about different policy issues and somebody's coming from one perspective, you can say, well, for somebody who's grown up like this, and these are their experiences, how do they fit in to that policy? And when what you say and what you do align, and when you come from a place of, I'm not here to fight with you. I'm not here to play gotcha with you. I'm here to understand and figure out a way that we solve problems. And when people see that that's what you're actually doing, that they can have a conversation with you that stays between the two of you, that it is not a judgment conversation, then they're more open also to listening, right?
Mm.
If somebody comes at you with, when you start saying something and somebody comes at you, well, but you're going to stop talking. You're
Yeah,
now on defense mode. And
yeah.
when we all know as women, when we stop talking, it's not a good place to be.
It's a wrap. It's a
As long as
wrap.
we're talking, it's good. Once we stop, getting a little dangerous.
Yes, yes. That's so true. You know, what I'm hearing you say is listening is key, doing so with an open heart, with the intention of understanding the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
It's important.
And it doesn't mean you agree with it. You don't have
Right.
to agree with it. But as long as the dialogue remains open, there is always an opportunity to change.
Yes, yes.
And when in this world where we see so many people on television and online just yelling at each other, that's not service.
No, not at all. Not
And
at all.
it doesn't mean you shouldn't, elevate policy issues that are a problem and talk about why those policy issues are detrimental, or other policy issues that are helpful. You should absolutely have those dialogues about policy. But to build the relationships, you have to be open and you have to be listening and learning.
Wow. Well, so the I'm a little jealous of your ability in Tallahassee to have that kind of open, interactive kind of conversations at the local level, because the sunshine,
Yeah.
the only place I can talk to my colleagues about anything that we may potentially vote on is on the dais. And that sometimes doesn't lead you to have real, deep, meaningful conversations so you can fully understand a person's perspective, right? Because a lot of times your perspective is shaped really by your lived experience.
Right.
And at the local level, as you know, because you were in local government long before you went to Tallahassee, we are not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
How did you navigate and create that same bipartisan alliance and support when you were in local government?
Yeah, it was much harder because by the time you're going to a meeting, everybody else has talked to you except your colleagues on the dais on an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I must say that system is also ripe for manipulation.
Yep.
And that's unfortunate. I totally support the idea of transparency and sunshine, and people should want to understand the thought process, who people have met with, what has informed their decision on the dais. But it's very hard to build a collaborative approach when you're not allowed to talk to each other. And that's why communication is so key in building relationships. And you're kind of prevented from doing that on the local level, which I think is a shame.
Yeah, because it is, and it's a challenge. But listen, it's a system that that we get to lead from.
But I think it also starts with on the dais asking questions, and asking people to kind of explain their thought process. Being very mindful to not react. And that goes back to that mindfulness and that sense of purpose and being centered so that you're acting, you're not reacting.
I am growing. I'm growing into that. I'm growing into that.
As are we all. We put it out into the universe in the hopes. When I talk about it, it's also a reminder to myself.
Yes.
Let's be clear.
So, State Rep, how can we support you in your work as you go into this next session? What can we do? Because I know you and I have a shared passion for ensuring that our community has access to great mental health service, and that our children feel safe and loved. And I know that some of your legislative priorities are moving in that direction. How can we support you in your work?
Yeah, reach out first of all. Our email is hd like David 095 at myfloridahouse.gov. So send us an email with your thoughts. I would appreciate that. You can also go to myfloridahouse.gov and follow along with all the legislation that's been filed. And if you see legislation that you find problematic, reach out and let us know. If you find legislation that you think is great, reach out and let us know. And if you find legislation that's pretty good but could use some tweaks, reach out and let us know. That's the best way to help me do a better job.
Oh, fantastic. State Rep, thank you for taking the time to speak with us this morning in your busy schedule. So any final words of wisdom for women as they navigate their careers and their business and their families? Any final words of wisdom?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we've been talking about throughout. It's that mindfulness, it's being purposeful, and it's realizing that no matter what comes your way, you are good enough and you got this.
Oh, I love this. Thank you so much, State Rep. I really appreciate you. And may God bless you on your journey as you really do the work of the people. And I'm so happy to call you my friend.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me this it feels like just our conversation. I know other
It
people
really
will see
does.
it. And thank you for the example that you set to all of us as well, doing this work.
Thank you, State Rep. Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Dunn Wisdom Morning Show. As always, I want to remind you to be kind and loving to yourself because you absolutely deserve it. Be well, everyone.